Thank you. I'll try to be less shouty. This is actually not the first time I've spoken in Prague. I just was thinking about, I spoke at a conference on small talk. Has anyone heard of small talk? First object-oriented language to be successful, and a lot of the people that created that Agile Manifesto thing were small talkers, extreme programming, Scrum, came out of that community, and I learned a lot from that style of development as a programmer. I'm not here to talk to you about that. Delighted to be back though, because the sun is starting to come out, and my 4-year-old daughter's here, who's starting to look around and see all these churches really, and think they're all palaces or with princesses in them. So very happy to have her here as well. So she's not into Transformers, but this talk might just explain the title. Optimus Prime. We're really thinking about what we are optimizing, not just getting more mediocre or trying to do a little bit better at, but what are we trying to optimize our organization for to be successful? And this is actually the number one tool I've found in my consulting toolkit. So I'm a coach consultant, prefer to say consultant these days. And for the last maybe 6-7 years, I've been using this in every engagement. Every time I talk to a client, we start with, why change and what do you want from that change? And unless we can get some alignment around that, then, it's not clear as to what better is or what even the first step is. So I really think this is important to get that right. And this is really our true north, you can think of it that way. What is the direction that we want to continuously improve in? If we talk about improvement, well, what constitutes improvement or better? For me, it might be one thing, for you another. And as a fairly agile bias sort of guy, I might walk into a client and actually be valuing things that they themselves don't value. So unless I can tune into what they actually believe is going to be better for their organization, then we're not on the same page and we won't be able to actually be productive, being aligned about our choices. Does that make sense so far? Just that framing of what we're trying to talk about today. So I won't talk about this too much, other than I've just been doing a lot of Scrum training over the years. I was one of the first Scrum trainers in, Australia. And I've really become interested in some of the bigger picture things, because so many times people come to Scrum courses and say, this sounds great, but it's not me that needs to be convinced, it's some other people that just don't come to the training. Often the leadership and often the clarity as to what we're trying to achieve with it all is not really all there yet. So briefly mentioned, just in the last 2 weeks I've changed my company name, so I'm adapting very fast right now. Adapt with style, not agile with style or Scrum with style. But definitely trying to get more focus on this topic really, which is around getting everyone aligned around the direction we're going. So this is a quick outline of what we're talking about. I just want to explain what optimization goals are first of all, and then talk you through the approach I use to that. With that, and I have developed a series of cards. I guess it's a exercise I do with leaders to work through that in a very short and very productive way. There is a lot more to creating understanding about the direction we want to go and actually getting awareness and desire built, of course, than just this. So we will refer to that perhaps towards the end, like what's the next steps after doing this. But I've just found this piece to be a really kind of crucial conversation, I guess, in the whole scheme of things. Also want to talk about some real examples of doing this. So let's see if the technology works today. Would you like to test this out? Grabbing your smartphone, your smart device, there's a very small QR code, or you can attempt to put in that URL there. Apologies, I haven't made this bigger. Probably possible to do that. Probably do that. Maybe just keep it that way. Let's see if this works. I just want us all to have a think about what has most shaped our way of working. Okay, and I've got quite a lot of options here. Some of them are a little bit cheeky, but let's be honest about what do you think the primary thing is that's really shaped that. Who's got that poll coming up? I think it does ask for your name first up. You can put in anything you like there. Okay, great. Okay, let's try to be as honest about the situation as we can. So straight away, it looks like quite a diversity of different answers here, isn't it? There's all sorts of factors. We've heard a little bit about management consultancies, right? If they come in, that certainly happened a lot in my part of the world, come in with the executives, the senior managers, and basically had some sort of solution, I think, in mind, and that's been what has been rolled out. There seems to be quite a lot of social proof bias, trying to copy what other organisations, perhaps in our industry, are doing, be like the big guys. We want to be more like them, so we just copy their way of working. May or may not be appropriate. There's often that most influential person, isn't it, who's that kind of key player who says, I think I know the way we should operate. They may or may not have the skill, the background in organisational design to figure that out, but they think they have some solution. You can see the rest, but no prize for guessing which one I'm proposing is the better of these options. The last one there. So that's what this session's about, really, a structured and holistic way to come up with a way forward and redesign your organisation accordingly. Making sense? Just want to check in. Yeah? Great. All right. So what are optimizing goals? There's plenty of ways of thinking about this. Who's actually got any exposure to systems thinking? Is that something you've come across? Yes, I can see a few familiar faces. Put their hand up to that. That's a deeper topic, but I think we can all appreciate that we're surrounded by systems. We have systems in our body, we have the transport system, financial system. Your organisation has all sorts of management systems to do with resource allocation, incentives, career progression, how decisions get made, right? It's all systems. And especially at scale, these are the sorts of things that actually allow us to scale quite effectively, right? To have some sort of systemic way for the organisation to function. So the real question here, and I've been reflecting on this document, that one word I think I've overlooked for some years is this one here, right? Better. What actually is better? And what is better for our context? Which may not be exactly what the authors of this document had in mind, but we need to be clear about that, don't we? And if we're going to be actually improving in a certain direction and have that aligned, especially at scale, and to be coherent and effective, we actually need to actually understand what better looks like and what direction we're trying to go. So has anyone heard this quote? I think this is a classic. All organizations are perfectly designed to get the results they get or currently get. Does that make sense? Like if you ran that past some of your colleagues, they would go, yeah, it's pretty obvious, right? We're getting certain results now, right? And if we're not satisfied with those results, if we want something different to be successful with our business strategy, to be successful in the market or whatever, and we think we need some change, okay, we might need to change this thing called the system, at least some elements of our organizational systems to actually achieve that. Okay, so I think that's a simple way of thinking about it. Who's seen this classic, the Deming quote? Yeah, a bad system will beat a good person every time. There is a nice law of systems thinking. There is no blame, which is to say that all of us are beneficiaries or victims of the system we find ourselves in. Right? And I think that's a really good place to start, to sort of say, well, this is just our context, right? That we all find ourselves in a certain situation, and there's certain things which are, encouraging certain behaviours. There's certain sorts of rewards or sanctions or punishment if we don't do certain things, and that's going to cause certain results. And if those things are causing the wrong results for where we need to be as an organisation, we need to redesign those systems to actually encourage the right things we need, not what we perhaps have been doing for so many years. So yeah, every system has a purpose. It was designed for some reason to achieve some sort of outcome, and a lot of our organisations, who's working for an organisation that's been around for maybe more than 10 years, let's just say. Yeah. So can you imagine when they designed the management systems, put the organisational systems in place, were they really coming at from an environment with artificial intelligence disruption to the level we have today? Were any of the lean or agile principles being considered in designing that? Probably not, right? So, it may be today we actually want to take into account those sort of things, right? And that might mean we need to think differently about the purpose of the system and perhaps what we're trying to achieve from it. So yeah, we need to figure out what we're trying to optimize that system for, whether it's an incentive system, a resource allocation system, just the way we kind of make decisions. What are we trying to optimize it for? What is it trying to be really effective at? So just to take an analogy, this has been used quite a lot of times. I have done another one, but I just chose to go back to this one. We have a lot of these big things in Australia, digging up a huge amount of countryside and shipping it off to other countries. What would you say this is optimized for? Can someone just call out a thought on that? Durability, yeah. What else? Big load, yes. Right, and it's this sort of thing where you kind of expect it to be pretty robust and continue functioning for some time, but maybe occasionally we have to change a tyre. Is that something that happens in seconds, minutes? Could take a while, couldn't it? Right, and you probably expect that to take this thing out of action for a little while and actually do a big job, because these things are mighty heavy and quite a bit of work to deal with. Compare it with this. This is optimized. It's also a vehicle, isn't it? It's also got 4 wheels. It also goes from A to B, but it's optimized completely differently. What would you say this is optimized for? Speed, yeah. And not just in a straight line, like a drag car. It's actually, yeah. Agility, going around corners. Yeah, ability to steer, which I think is sometimes what we forget. And one of the capabilities we could shoot for, maybe not just going really fast in the wrong direction, but maybe ability to change direction. It depends, again, on your context, whether your business strategy requires that. Does anyone know the world record for changing all 4 tyres on one of these things? Yeah, I think it's down to 1.8 now seconds. Yeah, it's amazing, right? And they've worked very, very hard at optimizing that for many years, isn't it? Whole team of people and equipment and everything perfected down to that millisecond to try to shave time off these race cars. So completely different, set of management choices, if you will, to kind of optimize for that than to do it like that big mining truck. So yeah, we're trying to do the equivalent of making that decision. Like, what are we trying to optimize this vehicle for? But the vehicle is our organization. And hopefully not just one team, but something that actually shows up as meaningful for business success. It could be a broad customer-centric product. It could be, a broad group with an ecosystem of products and services. Hopefully it's the broadest scope we can work at with our current scope of change. So just the way I've come to this over the last couple of years is, in fact, probably more than that, come up with a few options for people to work with. Because I just find if I go into a meeting with some senior leaders, they're time poor, they really want quick sort of answers and make sure this is going to be fruitful for them, it can get into a pretty wishy-washy conversation, not very focused if it's very open-ended. If I just say, what do you want to optimize for? Well, first of all, we probably need to do a bit of homework around what we implicitly are currently optimized for. Often that's not explicit, and we might need to do a bit of study and study the work system a bit to understand that. But also, bring in hopefully the business strategy, the aspirations for the future. And yeah, we want to kind of arrive at something pretty concrete and actionable. So things we can actually say, all right, if we're going to optimize for X, then we may need to choose, Y, not Z. And that could include choice of framework or agile approach. It could result in different structures, different processes, all different sorts of things. So it's an important decision. So I've come up with some cards. It's not just my work. I've collaborated with some people, particularly in Europe, actually, and particularly in the LESS community. And thank you very much to those people. I think there's even one of them in the room today, a couple. People like Craig Larman, too, I guess, really inspired a few of us in the LESS community, particularly, to think about optimizing goals, I guess, or optimization goals. All right, so I'll flick you through examples of these. These are all available to all of you. The Creative Commons, you can use these in your... really appreciate if anyone does use them, providing feedback and kind of try to improve these. It's currently a set of 20. And yeah, I've just tried to come up with some wording to really clarify what these things mean. It's not perfect. I think there's still ideas I've got about how we can make this even better, and feedback I'm trying to take on board about them. So very, very interested to hear from you if you've got any thoughts on these today or tomorrow. But just to flick through them, we've got a variety of things. Some of them are perhaps fairly traditional sorts of things. We've got output predictability, by which we mean, what deliverables are going to be actually delivered at what sort of timings. Things like throughput, utilization, the classic resource utilization, make sure everyone's busy. And I've definitely seen in a lot of organizations that's kind of the implicit current optimizing goal. For a lot of middle managers, they're trying to make sure that their expert people are actually utilized and not just sitting idle. It just seems expensive and wasteful to not have them busy. But that is in conflict with other optimizing goals. It may not be able to optimize for flow, or some of these adaptability ones, or learning, if we're just trying to maximize people's utilization, and in fact we might actually have things delivered later. So yeah, that's an interesting conversation. So part of what this is to help sort of tease out the mental models and beliefs of the people we're working with, so that we can have a more targeted conversation and sort of say, well, okay, if we are optimizing for resource utilization, then what does that mean for actually lead time, or flow, or some of these other things we're talking about? Are these things compatible? And you learn a lot from those sort of conversations. So part of what I'm trying to do as a consultant is not sort of start with sort of teaching you about that necessarily. Like, there's a place for that, and you might do a bit of that as well. But start by asking and just try to understand the current thinking, so that we can have some real insights happen there. All right, so just looking through, just a few more there, and some of these have come from one or two experiences, I guess, the confidentiality, for example, and I think there's even what's that one? Role and career path security. Some organisations seem to value that a lot, and it's quite disruptive, perhaps, to tinker with that, people believe. All right, just some examples of physical cards in real workshops and what people landed on, for example, and I've done other things, kind of putting comments, I guess, from the conversation to it. I also do this online, so Miro is a great tool Miro, for doing this sort of thing. And yeah, just one thing I'm doing with this is to use approach like planning poker. Do you know that approach where we basically give everyone opportunity to make a selection without seeing everyone else's choices? So we avoid anchoring bias. So that's what we do with these cards, basically say, all right, everyone involved, and these could be senior managers, let's make a selection, and then when everyone's got a selection, we'll reveal that to the whole group and compare and have a conversation from there, and then rank them, basically. So we've got the most popular choice at the top, and I've found it useful to consider looking at a top 3, roughly, but part of that is to consider, are these things actually reinforcing and coherent, or are they perhaps in some sort of conflict with each other? And that's part of the conversation you can have on the back of this. One thing I also like to do with time is have each person involved to actually explain the thinking behind their choice, and that again can draw out a lot of interesting insights as to what their mental models are. All right, so sorry, what am I doing here now? This is just some quick examples. I have run this as an interactive workshop where we've got some real role-playing going on and different characters kind of saying different things about what they believe is valuable for the business. So would you like to, again, take out that device? I'll just explain what we're doing. So imagine this is a chief technology officer saying, my aspiration is for shorter lead time from starting of work to production release, with less exposure to blockers and changes of direction impacting the work in progress. So just taking that, what do you think might be their choice as to these optimizing goals? I encourage you to look at the options on your device rather than what's on the screen. It's not so much a test, it's more just to exercise the mental muscle of what do these mean. So I've had a client with a similar sort of line of thinking. And yes, they came to throughput as what was the top thing to optimize for in that organization. All right. I've got a couple more just to sort of see examples of how these choices might play out. So I'll flick to the next one, if that's all right. Okay, this is it. So imagine we've got a fintech organization, head of wealth management says, well, our aspiration is to be able to outmaneuver competitors around digital wealth management features that support the business strategy. So they've got some perhaps incumbents who've been there for some time. We're trying to kind of employ more new technology, maybe some bleeding edge sorts of things before they do, and start to take market share from those competitors. So which one would you say? Adaptiveness to the product/service seems to be pretty clear there. Yeah, and again, I've had clients who've had that sort of line of thinking, right? We need to be more adaptive because, yeah, it's really not something we can predict out for the next year or two. We need to be able to change direction at a low cost of change and low switching cost. Okay, and that can lead to an interesting conversation too about what is current cost of change, switching costs relative to competitors, and what would you like to do about that? So, head of product, we've got feedback. Basically, in this context, there's lots of features that weren't used enough to justify them being developed. So, wouldn't we like to improve that and actually make sure we're investing in, higher value things? And use customer feedback to help improve that, help optimize that. So we want to shorten the feedback loop and be able to identify if we're going in a profitable direction or a beneficial direction or not, and change direction at very short intervals. So yeah, customer value. And again, quite a few clients I've worked with have identified that as the primary thing. And maybe some of these other optimizing goals as the enablers of that overall ends. And that's an interesting thing to think about too, like what is the means-ends relationship between these different outcomes, capabilities. All right. So, by the way, I haven't mentioned it, but really important to drive this from some real context, and I'll talk about that in a moment. But just roughly, who's done something like this at work or aware of something like this happening? I can see one hand, two hands. Okay, all right. So here's the opportunity. We've got two people in the room that have actually raised their hand on that. Personally, I think we should all be doing this. Not necessarily us personally, but at least someone in an organisation having a conversation about this. It doesn't necessarily take much more than an hour or two to bring this to that conversation, but there might be some weeks of study and other conversations and other things we need to look at around that. And to operationalise this, to convert this to real choices and decisions is obviously an ongoing journey, just like we've heard today. All right, so how does this guide decisions and actually manifest as real choices? Has anyone come across Galbraith's STAR model? This is not a big lecture on that one, but it's a very core model, so there's about 3 hands, in organisational design. And part of what we're getting at here is the number one thing to drive this all is your business strategy. And strategy, of course, is about making choice that involves saying no to certain things in order to focus our strategy on something else. We can't be all things to all people, as I think we've heard many times, right? So we need to bring that very much into this conversation, saying, here's the strategy, we understand that this is what we're really trying to double down on, it's about customer acquisition, whatever that is, in a market which is quite volatile, we're trying to carve out new space in that market. Therefore, what capabilities do we need? What performance characteristics do we need? And that's really our optimization goals. So the focus of this workshop is convert strategy, the business context, to specific capabilities in the form of optimizing goals. And then comes the rest of it, right? Which is a whole other set of considerations about what structures do we need in place? How should power be distributed? How should decisions be made? What information, how is it disseminated, and how does the workflow, how does information flow? And would you agree that a lot of, let's say, maybe less than stellar agile adoptions have focused a lot on this? I certainly know of a lot of Scrum adoptions. And people that frame Scrum as just a process change, right? And if they think that way, especially as middle and senior management, and just limit it to that, then we're just changing some superficial sort of processes within even structures that aren't quite right. Even if we call it a cross-functional team, but we're not really encouraging people to grow their skills in a cross-functional dimension, let alone other dimensions. And we're not perhaps changing anything on the metrics and rewards. We're not changing anything too much about skills and mindsets. Maybe it's a lot of talk about mindset, but really can be a product of some of the other organizational systems around people, right, which encourage certain things or not. So the whole point of this is to say we need to consider all of these factors. And in fact, these things should be aligned and self-reinforcing. If we have just a change, like imagine your organization was originally coherent, like all these things were set up to be work effectively for, let's say, a waterfall approach or some, fairly command and control way of operating. And now we just make a change at the process piece of it, but leave all the rest of it, in the mode that was working for command and control, for waterfall, big batches, etc. How well is that process change going to work? Will that be sustainable? And I think this is where a lot of agile transformation efforts have fallen flat, is basically we haven't really considered all these other elements. And can you see, one of the interesting things here is it points out that culture, the reoccurring norms, behavior, performance, and results are a product of these settings. Like, it's literally the way you tune these different settings that result in performance, culture, etc. So we need alignment in these things. And without that we have friction. Okay, just quickly, once you've established this, to me it's gold as an agile coach or consultant. Because if we can say, all right, we have decided that highest customer value or maximizing customer value is the number one thing. We want to be able to work in the pure order of what we believe is highest value. Then there's actually actionable decisions we can make to say that team structure A is better than team structure B. So for example, cross-functional teams might not be enough if they're only limited to one component or one step in a business process. We might need to look at actually having feature teams, teams that aren't just siloed into one step in the business process, if we're serious about optimizing for that. So can you see how that's a really useful tool to be able to say, if you want X, here are some options, and one of them is actually a superior option. In fact, you won't be able to optimize fully for X unless you actually make that choice. And to me, that's just been missing in a lot of agile coaches' toolkits. We just haven't been able to hold up the direction and say, hey, this is making the choices much more stark. Okay, so it eliminates those other options, and we're left with the one that perhaps is optimal for the way forward. And this can result in different choices about these sorts of things, right? I would suggest that basically all of these are optimized for different things. A longer conversation we can have over drinks about exactly what's optimized for what. Some of them are much more explicit about that than others. But I really think it's something we should start to become more, discuss more and become more, kind of cognizant of those sort of choices. So maybe just have a quick look at this one. See if we've got time. Okay. No? Okay. All right. We might just wrap up with one final thing then. Let's do it. So just wanted to leave you with some quick insights. One is, this is not everything you need to consider. I'll put these slides up. I'll give you a link to it actually straight away so you can actually see any remaining slides there. But you can get surprises out of this. I've had organizations where I thought they were going to make one choice and they made a completely different choice. And it was just hidden, right? People weren't being explicit about what they were trying to achieve. And definitely there's a lot more to trying to action these optimizing goals than just saying this is a goal. Has anyone come across this body of work, the Creating Agile Organizations? I personally think it's the best thing out there at the moment in terms of education on what to do with these optimizing goals, to convert that to choices about your structures, your processes, and really do a custom agile approach that will be suitable for your business context. And just wanted to leave you with this. So this is a link to a Google Drive folder with these slides, with those optimizing goal cards, and just for some other notes. If anyone wants to collaborate on this, I really love that. I think this is a great group to kind of get into that with. So yeah, that's just that link to the right-hand side there, if you'd like to leave some comments about what you think is missing or could be better about these cards. But thank you very much.